Everybody's got a secret, and every family has gone through tough times and has a story to tell. And gentlemen, we appreciate you telling your story.
Thank you. My name is James Beck, and you'll probably see me around the church from time to time with a smile on my face and a Bible under my arm. I was blessed to be born into a Christian family, a loving family. My father was one of the most wonderful men I knew. He spent every Saturday afternoon with me. And when he'd come home at work, he'd always ask me if I had something that I wanted to do. I was indeed lucky. My dad taught me how to play baseball. He was there when I knocked my first home run. My dad meant a lot to me. And you know, after my dad and I would have a long afternoon of playing football or basketball, we'd come home and walk in the house, and there on the table was a big plate of chocolate chip cookies and a big glass of milk. It was wonderful living in my home. My mother was the first one to tell me about Jesus. My mother spent time with us, tucked us in at night, and always made sure that we said our prayers. I had a wonderful home. And what I learned from my mom and dad, I wanted to pass on to my kids.
My name's also James Beck, and I come from a Christian home. You see me around here with a smile on my face and a Bible under my arm. My parents had a home for sexually abused teenage girls, and I was always expected to be respectful, play the part. My dad was even a pastor for a while, even a youth pastor. All my friends thought he was the best. They always wanted to hang out with him. We'd go on a hike, and they'd ask, hey, ask your dad to come. We've even built a log house that we live in right now. And you know what? You see me around here with a smile on my face and a Bible under my arm.
Reality is, there wasn't a red and white checkered tablecloth. There were no cookies and milk, no baseball games, no football games. I spent very little time with my dad. On Saturday afternoons, my dad would come in and he'd say, son, you want to go to town? I knew where we were going. We'd drive into town and pull up behind a tavern about 1 o'clock, and my dad would go inside. And about 2 hours later, he'd come out with a Coke and a bag of potato chips. And I'd say, Dad, are we going to go do something? Can we go home now? And he said, no, son, I've got a little more business to conduct. And he'd go back in. A couple hours later, another Coke, another bag of potato chips, and another Coke, and another bag of potato chips. And that's the time I spent with my dad. I'd wake up the next morning, sometimes in the back seat of the car. Sometimes I'd be in my own bed. Sometimes, there was a couple times that my dad closed the tavern down and we slept in the back of the tavern in the car. I was about 10 years old and my dad said, Jim, you ready to go to town with me today? And I said, you know, Dad, I think I've got something else to do today. That was the last afternoon we spent together. I started hanging out with the guys and doing something a little bit more interesting than hanging out behind a tavern. And my mom was tough. My mom could outcuss nearly anybody I knew. And by the time I was 10 years old, I had heard it all. My mother was the meanest person in my entire life. When I went into the Army, I was in the 101st Airborne for a while, and then I was in the 7th Special Forces Group. And those sergeants thought they were tough, and they thought they could really talk a mean streak and really cuss you out. And I would sit there and chuckle when they'd get tough, and people looked scared because I'd already been through that. I'd already listened to that kind of language. My mom was mean, and she put every bit of that in me. What I learned from my mom and dad, I guess I did pass on to my family.
I was scared to death of my father until I was 11. I was always told how stupid I was. Slow, good for nothing. I never understood why everyone else thought he was the greatest man alive, and he treated me the way he did. My dad hit me. My dad cussed at me. I remember every word he said. I even remember the time that I took a gun and tried to commit suicide because of how my father made me feel. And at that time, you saw me walking around here with a smile on my face and a Bible under my arm.
About 12 years ago, we went on vacation, and we were visiting my wife's aunt and uncle. And while we were down there, I don't know, about the second or third night, Rayetta Graham looked at me, and she said, "Jim, you guys seem so happy. You seem like you really got it together. What's the secret to your marriage?" And being a talker, I told her, I said, "Well, number one, we love each other very, very much. Sue and I have a deep bonding love for each other. And I said, number two, we really like each other. And I don't think if you don't like each other, you can't love each other. And I said, number three, Sue and I have excellent, excellent communication." She looked over to Sue and she said, "Sue, is that about the way you see it?" And Sue said, "Well, no." She said, "I think as much as Jim can, he loves me, but he doesn't like me and he never has. And we've never communicated." I looked over because I thought there was a punchline coming or something, and instead of a punchline, she started crying and weeping. And I got mad and angry. And I jumped up and I said, "How dare you do this in front of your family to embarrass me?" And it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, man, every time I open my mouth, they tell me I'm wrong. Every time Sue brings anything up and I try to defend myself, either Rayette or Dick step in and say, "Well, Jim, you see where you were wrong here?" I laid there in bed and I thought, boy, they act like I'm just like my mom and dad. Everything that I'm doing and everything they're telling me I'm doing is just what I hated in my parents. And then I thought, I'm repeating history. And maybe someday my son will get married and he'll repeat it again. And then his son can get married and repeat it again. Or I can stop it right now and I can break the chain. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to do it. And I fell asleep. I woke up early the next morning and I woke Sue up and I said, "Sue, I want you to know that from this day forward, I'm going to make it up to you. And for the 12 years that you weren't happy, I'm going to spend the rest of my life, each and every day, making it all up to you. I promise you that." I went up after I talked to Sue and I said, "Bubba," I said, "I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life," Bubba was 11, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Everything that I stole from you, every minute that I stole out of your childhood, I'm going to make it up to you. I promise. I want you to tell me one thing right now that I can do to show you that I'm going to make it up to you." And he looked up at me and he said, "Dad, if I never had to work with you again the rest of my life, that would be good." And I said, "Okay, son." And when I left, I took a list. I had a piece of paper and it said, "From now on, you can't do these things." And there was a whole list. And then there was another piece of paper and it said, "From now on, you've got to do these things." I did not know how to be a husband and I didn't know how to be a father. But I knew what lists were. And so I read my list every day. And once a week, or sometimes more often, I'd go to James and I'd say, "James, this is tough for a dad." And I'd say, "James, how am I doing?" been about 13 years. Bubba and I sat in a coffee shop up here a couple weeks ago. And he said, you know, Dad, it's taken almost as long to wash out all the garbage as it did to put it in. What my parents taught me, I definitely passed on to my family. But I found out it was never too late to change every bit of that.
Each of us choose what we want to pass on to our kids. And all of us who are younger parents, right now, you're choosing what you're programming into your kids. If it's going to be, if you're going to break the chain, it's up to me. We've broken it. But it's also up to you, and you. No one will break it for you. You got to work on it. It takes a lot of work. It took us 11 years, but you can do it.